Hello and welcome everybody. Today we finishing the Benko Gambit theory of my Gambit Guide course about the sharp opening lines. And in the previous lesson we were studying how to play the Benko Gambit with black pieces after d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5 and b5, and we were looking a number of very good examples showing how black has to complete in development, what setup of the pieces we have to use, how to develop and to continue pressing white's queen side. And also I explained you that as a contradiction action, white decided that after b5, c takes b5 and a6, it's not necessary to accept the sacrifice, which only leads to the great compensation for black, but also possible to play more positional move b5, b6, meaning just to sacrifice back the pawn, but to stop black's initiative on the queen side completely. And as I said, the Benko Gambit is one of the most, I would say, famous opening line which was used by a lot of very strong grandmasters, and also the world champion Garry Kasparov used this opening many times in his practice. Today also Mickey Adams, the brilliant England grandmaster, and the talented Magnus Carlsen, as number of other grandmasters are still using the Benko Gambit as an important part of the opening repertoire. So Garry Kasparov played against Jonathan Hjartarson, Icelandic grandmaster, in the Munich tournament in 1994, and after b6, d6, knight c3 and queen takes b6, white played immediately e2 and e4. In the previous lesson I explained you that much better for white to start here with knight f3 and only then to move the knight to d2. In other sources we call this period of Nimzowitsch, so because knight is coming to the key square to c4 after knight f3 and d2, and this idea knight f3 and d2 even more familiar for the other opening line which we call Benoni defense, where also the c4 square one of the most important and the greatest outpost for white's knight. So instead Jonathan Hjartarson immediately played e2 and e4. This is already good sign for black. After g6, knight f3, bishop g7. Last time, so Hjartarson had the opportunity to play knight d2, but he immediately pushed the pawn a4, trying to get more space advantage on the queen side. As I said also in my previous lesson, it is extremely dangerous for black to play a5 because it's weakening too much the b5 square. So after black answers a6 and a5 and bishop b5 check, let's say bishop d7 and knight d2, instead of continue playing for the queen side, black has to be very careful about the a5 pawn. So knight is coming to c4 and black's position is extremely dangerous. So Kasparov allowing a4 and a5 from white side and just continue short castling a5 and queen c7. So black may be planning to play e6, maybe trying to play knight bd7 and then rook b8, and white is just simply continue developing bishop e2, and according to my understanding this is not so accurate move. Much better was to play knight d2. Why? Because here black could push immediately the bishop to g4 and trade in the knight. So in the game, Alterman played bishop c4, which is, I would say, more aggressive way, but still, because black is allowed to play bishop g4, Kasparov immediately moved here the bishop. h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight b d7. So I would like to ask you now, what this bishop is doing on c4? So this bishop is not taking part in the white's attack, so white cannot play e4, e5 immediately, and as well, white has to prevent black from playing knight e5. Let's say after short castling, knight e5, queen e2, black is following the important positional rule when you have less space. Trade pieces, knight takes c4, queen takes c4, and let's say rook f to b8 is getting very nice counterplay over the b file. So knight is coming to d7, maybe black is going to occupy the e5 square with a knight. At the same time, rook is ready to jump to b4, and then black could just double rooks over the b file, so continue pressing white's queen side. So instead of playing for initiative and advantage, white has to think about the equalizing, and it's so quite difficult. So after knight bd7, Alterman immediately played queen e2, attacking pawn on a6. So what would be your most natural reaction? So many of you would play in this position, queen b7, trying to protect this pawn on b7, and maybe later intending to bring the knight to e5. But Kasparov is completely forgetting about this a6 pawn. He's not thinking about material, he's thinking about initiative, and that's what I'm asking from you. When you play the aggressive opening lines like the Benko Gambit, where you have domination of all the pieces, more important just to keep the initiative than to protect your pawns. So the initiative is most important in that lines. After queen b7, Alterman would have played, of course, f2, f4, and black's knight cannot reach e5 square anymore, and white's position remains quite good, quite okay in this situation. So instead, Gary immediately moved the knight to e5, sacrificing the pawn on a6, knight e5. So bishop takes e6 enforced. And now we locked the bishop, c4, the bishop is in prison. At the same time, black is intending knight d3 with the check, and how to protect the from rook takes a6. Bishop b5, knight d3 check, king f1, rook takes a5. Winning back the pawn, so suddenly white cannot capture back on a5 so easily, because bishop on c1 is unprotected. So what to do then? White played rook b1, but black's position already great. Knight d7, another typical move which is studied in the Benko Gambit. Important to open the diagonal for the dark square bishops. At the same time, black is intending maybe to bring the knight or to e5 or to c5, supporting this d3 killer. Also, black is intending to bring rook to b8. So all black pieces in the game. White's king is still stuck in the center. Rook on h1 is out of the game. White is having all discoordinated pieces. It's not a big surprise that the game here is finishing very, very fast. After bishop takes d7 and queen takes d7, white is trying to play g3, preparing the square g2 for a king, somehow trying to connect between the both rooks from b1 and h1. Rook b8, bishop d2. So black even doesn't like to capture the pawn too early, just Kasparov played rook a7, and after king g2, rook a to b7, because he paid attention that white absolutely cannot stop black from winning the pawn on b2. So from the Benko Gambit, when usually we are having pawn down, so black got a position when it's getting already material advantage. b4, rook takes b4, rook takes b4, rook takes b4, rook a1. So white is trying to create some counterplay over the black's back rank. h5. Of course, important to open a window for a king and prevent white from the rook a8 threat. Rook a8, king h7, knight d1, attacking the rook on b4. So black cannot move the pawn yet after c3. c3 square is quite good protected. But rook b1, knight e3, and it's time to bring the queen into the game. Queen b5, queen f3, and white is having some threats as well, so we have to cover our king side. Knight e5. So queen is just move away from b2 square, after which the c pawn will be promoted very fast into the queen. Queen f4, queen b2. How white has to protect this bishop on d2. So white is trying tactical chance, knight f5. So now black cannot accept this Greek sacrifice. After g takes f5, queen takes f5, suddenly this is white who is winning. After knight g6, queen takes h5, black's king has no escape. But check is not checkers, so after knight f5 we are not forced to capture this knight. So Kasparov simply played c3. When you have the pass pawn, it's good idea always to think about moving forward your pass pawn. c3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, knight takes e7. So white has now a pawn for a piece, but the biggest problem is completely unprotected king side, and black is deciding the game after queen e1. There is no way to stop checkmate from g1 or h1 squares. So after queen e1, Jonathan Alterman resigned in this game. Despite the fact that Kasparov won this game and some, I would say, good result by the top player in the line after b6, d6, knight c3 and queen takes b6, I would say that it's better to find just black were looking for some other solution for that problem, because if Alterman would play the correct moves order, knight f3 and knight d2, and then to bring the knight to c4, I guess even for Kasparov it would be extremely difficult to organize and create a serious counterplay on the queen side and in the center. That's why after d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, b5, c takes b5, a6, b6, black started to look for some other opportunities. First of all, bishop b7 unfortunately doesn't change so much the situation. White just simply brings the knight to c3, and next move e4, still keeping quite unpleasant pressure in the center. And once again, black is not organizing any serious counterplay on the queen side. It's just very, very difficult. All white pieces are very easy, could be developed. And G6, D6, queen takes B6 more or less leads to the similar position. And finally, we started to analyze quite seriously the old opportunities. If we remember from our first lesson, when the Russian masters started to analyze that Gambit line, so the first, this Gambit line was named after the Russian chess masters, and Volga Gambit from the Russian river Volga. They analyze here, in such a situation, idea with e6 attacking white center. And this e6 line becomes one of the most important development in the Benko Gambit in the recent years. So after e6, black is attacking white center. So white cannot capture d takes e6 after f takes e6, and later on queen takes b6 and d5. So what for we are playing here? Black is not only getting just strong center, but even material is completely equal. So the different ways for white is trying to keep the center, so trying to keep this d5 pawn. But how? e4 cannot be played because knight takes e4. d6 is very dangerous because after queen takes b6, the d6 pawn is gone. So with no solutions, we have to consider here the move knight c3. So what we see now, after knight c3, white is protecting the center, but knight takes d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, and black is playing knight c6. Still, it's almost not possible for white to protect this pawn, to save this b6 pawn. So black is intending to play queen takes b6 later on. But if black would continue here, bishop e7, then castling short side, that at some moment white queen should go away from d5, that black could really get the quite nice counterplay after d7, d5. So white is having no material advantage. All black pieces are playing, semi-open b file, control over the center. Everything's so great. Unfortunately, it's not so simple as it looks like, because white is having very strong move, knight f3. And the main problem that if black is capturing on b6, white has quite strong opportunity to bring the knight to e5 and to attack the f7 pawn, which is quite difficult to protect. At the same time, white is intending to capture on c6 maybe, and to double black pawn on the queen side. So after knight e5, let's say knight takes e5 and queen takes a8, unfortunately, all this analysis doesn't show any compensation for black. So white is just simply bringing the queen back very soon. So right now, white also has to protect this bishop on c8 and exchange down. Some compensation, of course, but not so simple. Otherwise, how to protect this f7 square? So all this line were not so popular when in 1988, 1987 even, I looked at this position, I analyzed it quite seriously, and I asked myself, so why black should capture on b6 immediately? Why not to bring the rook to b file, attacking that pawn, to capture with the rook on b6, then to bring the bishop to b7, send away the queen from d5, and to get the strong pawn center after d7, d5. At the same time, rook from b8 in the future, attacking the pawn on b2. So further development for black could be bishop e7, short castling, and so black is great. So let's recover the whole variation. So this rook b8 move becomes one of the most popular. So I showed this to my friend a grandmaster, Valery Niver. When he started to play it, he played it, and after that I started to play. So the main reaction for white here, of course, knight e5. Once again, black cannot capture on e5 because queen takes e5 check, and the rook is going to b8. But black is not forced. Black could play for initiative. After queen f6, black is attacking the knight on e5. Knight takes c6, b takes c6. And if queens goes away, I just capture on b6 with a very good position. So black bishops are coming very fast into the game. After c4, I'm ready to bring the second bishop to b4. And black is having just great compensation for these double pawns. One of my game continuing here after knight e5, queen c7. So my opponent played here bishop g5, and after bishop e7, knight e5, but black is just simply doing short castling without taking any ready even to sacrifice the pawn on c6. Bishop takes e7, then queen takes e7, knight takes c6, b takes c6, queen takes c6. So even here, black is having some material deficit after moves like bishop e6 or bishop f5 with idea rook f to c8. So black is gaining the b6 pawn back, and look at white pieces, all are still completely undeveloped. Not talking about that black could move immediately the bishop to b7. So quite strong compensation. So after looking for this position for a while, my opponent decided just to exchange all the pieces, but black got just very good position and at least equalizing after b3, bishop e6, bishop e2, a5 is additional a4. So I'm just reach the equalizing without any problem. So quite easy draw. This variation becomes very popular. So all started to analyze how to get advantage in this line after b6, e6, knight c3, take on d5. And white decided that it's just not enough to play in this position knight e5. And we have to follow the normal development after e4, bishop e7, and bishop c4, intending the checkmate on f7. So black playing short castling, and rook comes to b6. And this is a critical position which was tested in many games. Quite interesting. Black just lifted the rook via the b file, via the b6, and now rook could take part also in the kingside attack, also to attack against the white's pawn on e4. Also bishop could go to b7 in many situations. After b3, bishop b7, black is already intending to play knight d4. One of my game on ICC continued here, queen d3, knight b4, queen e2, and d7, d5, destroying white's center and open the diagonal for the bishop. After e takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop d2, black just got very active counterplay after rook e6. So black is having all the pieces in the game. My opponent played queen d1, and after rook g6, black already looking to the g2 pawn. Of course, best continuation for white here was something like rook e1, but even after that, black is getting very good position. by playing bishop d6 or bishop f6. Instead, my opponent decided to attack, to go for attack after knight e5. Completely overlooked my strong counter-attacking move. So just one shot finished the game immediately. Looks like g2 check, and white has to resign. After king take g2 and knight e3, white is losing the queen without any compensation. So that one of the most important development today in the Benko Gambit. So after d4, knight f6, c4 and c5, d5, b5, c takes b5, a6, b6 and e6, white has to fight for advantage only after knight c3. So after knight c6, no need to be scared of all the moves like e4 or bishop g5. So you just continue developing your pieces. Bishop comes to e7, short castling, queen takes to b6, and then knight b4 and d5. For instance, if white is playing something like e3, bishop e7, bishop c4, castling short side, knight f3, rook b8, attacking this pawn. Let's say white is playing something like b3. Okay, capture. Bishop b2, finally attacking the queen. Queen goes away. d5, taking the center, and now rook controlling the wall, 6th rank. So the black is also controlling the center. So after bishop e2, we can just bring the bishop into the center. So black is having very good position. Knight always could go back to c6. Black could develop the queen to c8 or to d7. The second rook coming into the game. So all the pieces are very good post. No any problem. So that's why it's so important for white to play in this position. Knight f3 force black to move the rook on b8, and then to play e4, not just intending to develop the bishop to c4, but more important, of course, to trying to control the d5 important square. And we cannot capture the pawn immediately. Look at that. Pay attention. It's very dangerous to play something like queen takes b6, because after bishop c4, how to protect this pawn on f7? So be careful. After e4, necessary to play first of all bishop e7. This is the most important move. So this is the best moves order. So bring the bishop to e7 first. Now, when white is playing bishop c4, you're ready to castling. And now you're capturing with the next move. Rook takes b6. Further, bishop comes to b7. And then knight could go away and push in d5. For instance, short castling. Rook takes. Let's say white could try playing something like rook b1 maybe, protect this pawn on b2. Bishop b7. And where to go with the queen? Queen d3, then we already could play something like knight b4, like in the previous game. At the same time, black also could intend playing knight a5. Some other option, some other opportunity just to attack the bishop on c4. So today we finish our course about the Benko Gambit, and as I showed that even Grandmaster on the very top level, like Garry Kasparov, Magnus Carlsen, Mickey Adams, Veselin Topalov, were using the Benko Gambit as the strong weapon against the white's d2, d4 move. And in the many variations, black is having quite brilliant counterplay, very, very interesting, with the open files, open diagonals, with a good initiative on the queen side. Sometimes black is getting the initiative also in the king side and in the center. So black is usually set up in its pieces with the fianchetting the bishop to g7, that brings bishop to a6. And if white is trying to contradict all this setup and to play b5, b6, sacrificing the back the pawn, so you have to change completely your strategy and to smash white center after e6, trying to obtain the very active position of your minor pieces and using the b file for your rook, bringing the rook to b8 and then to take the pawn on b6. Thank you very much for watching the fourth part of the Benko Gambit series of my Gambit guy. See you next time. If you have any question, request, you can contact me via my site www.chesslessons.wordpress.com. Bye.